The trickle of people joining the meeting has stopped, so I think we can get going. Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us. I'm really excited to welcome you all to this exciting event with the Green Party Trade Union Group, NHS Workers Say No, and a great deal of others as well. It's really, really important that so many people have come to join us this evening to hear from the workers and from others as well, how we can support NHS workers in their campaigns, both for a restorative 15% pay rise for Agenda for Change contracts, but also for a publicly owned and managed NHS from the bottom to the top. Just a few things before we get started. My name is Matthew. I'm the chair of the Green Party Trade Union Group. I'm going to be sort of, I guess, like managing this from a sort of technical perspective. So if you have any questions about how this is running, if you're having any technical difficulties, please don't hesitate to message me using the Zoom chat. The one other thing I would say now is if you're not speaking, and for the most part you won't be, please do keep your microphone muted. It'll improve the call for everyone. We will be able to sort of mute you, but it's best if you do it yourself. Yeah, and I think that's more or less all of the housekeeping. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jonathan Bartley, Green Party co-leader, to introduce the session and to say a few words about why this campaign and why Greens supporting it is so crucial right now. Over to Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you so much for organising this event. I think it's absolutely fundamental and crucial to what we're doing and the Green Party, who we are. It's an issue that's incredibly close to my heart. My dad was a medical officer in Normandy. Yeah, I am that old. And he was there at the founding of the NHS, and he spent all his working life in the NHS. And I have such fond memories of going with him to his ward at St Thomas's Hospital to visit patients every Christmas Day. We would go up there. That was the kind of doctor that he was. Sadly, he died just before that kind of defining moment at the 2012 Olympics, which set out just how much a part of our national identity the NHS is. We meet today in a very different world. The world has changed, as we all know, fundamentally over the last 18 months. It's changed, yes, but it's also worth casting our mind back to what was going on years before, indeed decades before COVID. As a young child in the 1970s, I'd sit on my dad's knee at his desk at home, and there I would see pens and papers across his desk that were branded with the names of pharmaceutical companies that were lobbying him as a doctor. These little freebies that they gave out, and it was the beginning of the drive for privatisation of the NHS even back then. And in the 1990s, Labour then built that bridge towards which the Conservatives and Lib Dems have been marching towards privatisation. And in 2016, it really hit home to me. In fact, the last 18 years, it's really hit home to me over having to rely month after month after month on the NHS because of my son, who's a powered wheelchair user, born spina bifida. I'm in and out of hospital for appointments every month and have been for the last 18 years, really. And in 2016, I spent a month with my son in St George's Hospital for another operation. Our operation was cancelled 3 times before it went ahead. And it was so clear to all of us that the NHS was in peril years before the pandemic. The NHS was allowed to flounder in the grip of a deep funding and staffing crisis. And the private sector parked its tanks on our hospital lawns. It was invited in on a bigger scale than ever in those years before the pandemic to cherry pick the profitable services. And let's be clear about what this government does. It pursues a policy of divide and rule in order to avoid responsibility for its own policy failure. And we see it time after time. It did it over social security, setting the so-called deserving against the undeserving, to cut the welfare budget. It did it with migration, it did it with disability, it did it with education, setting parents against one another in the context of grammar schools. And before the pandemic, it was doing it over healthcare, setting up older people as those to blame for a so-called unaffordable NHS. And this is simply yet another lie. It was the choice of national politicians to spend 2.5% less of our GDP on health than countries like France and Germany. It was their choice to waste billions on the internal and external market, their choice to waste the time of clinicians making them bid against each other to provide services, their choice to let the private sector in, and so create all this waste, inefficiency, loss of collaboration that brings. It was their choice not to pay and treat NHS staff properly, to pay nursing and cleaning staff pitiful wages, to pay women less than men, to discriminate against people of colour. And pre-COVID, in the light of Brexit and new trade deals, big corporations have been eyeing up our NHS for further privatisation. They want a slice of the pie. And COVID, of course, has shone a completely new spotlight on the state of the NHS. And in many respects, it's highlighted what the Green Party has been saying for years and years, that health is a public good. Our health service should not be run for profit. It's not for sale, it should be free to all, and that includes migrants and refugees. That the NHS is about the common good, that the real wealth creators are those who work within the NHS. The key workers on who we all depend are to be valued and to be cherished. And I was absolutely thrilled when we passed Rebecca's motion at Green Party conference to support a 15% pay rise for NHS staff. Such a pay rise would, of course, in large part pay for itself. We've consistently argued this for years, that the NHS needs far more investment. We said that more than any other party, and we've said that it needs more investment than any other party, or any other government for that matter, has been proposing. And this is part of our wider commitment to transition the economy away from destructive practices such as polluting fossil fuels, to create a really healthy economy in which we all thrive, healthy in every sense of the word. And we've also for years, of course, championed the NHS reinstatement bill around a positive choice to clear up this mess that's happened over decades and successive governments, to get rid of the clutter and the inefficiency of the market, to bring back the founding principles of cooperation and trust. Markets don't work for essential public services. That's why the NHS was founded in the first place. What we need, and what the NHS reinstatement bill will give us, is a planned NHS based on the needs of the local population, publicly paid for and critically publicly provided. And at this moment, with the monumental backlog in the NHS, with staff burned out, this bill, I believe, is needed more than ever, because we're at a crossroads where the government could easily use this crisis to push for greater privatisation and austerity. And in the past, reforms have been pushed through to dress up cuts as efficiency savings. The decisions have been made using secretive and dysfunctional systems, imposing more plans on the already discredited apparatus created by the 2012 Health and Social Care Act. It's not going to improve care for patients and save our services. So we're at a crossroads and we need to push very clearly to go down the road that we've been pushing for decades. The NHS was dismantled on a daily basis by the constant tendering, the constant bidding and outsourcing of services before the pandemic. And there is little in the way of indication that that's going to stop. And that's why we've got the fight of our lives on our hands right now, and why that 15% pay rise that we're calling for is so important. And the NHS reinstatement bill represents a plan that has been worked out by people with a deep knowledge, understanding and love for the NHS. It's undergone extensive consultation. It's had explicit clauses in the bill, clause 9, which incurs a duty to minimise disruption. It would be, a very easy thing to do compared to what's going on at the moment. It has the backing of the BMA, Unite, a huge number of grassroots supporters. So I think it's something we should be pushing and championing right now. So in conclusion, we know, famously the Leave campaign exploited the NHS logo across the side of their campaign bus. they got one thing right, and that is that we do need to take back control of our NHS from duplicitous privateers, and we need to rally behind this NHS reinstatement bill. It's clear too, we've got to create that more resilient economy, more resilient public services as part of that for what lies ahead. The world has changed. We are going to need to learn to live with the threat of climate breakdown and the threat of more pandemics. Scientists are warning that they will come, and of course variants we know are going to come our way. And climate breakdown will bring still more threats, perhaps many of them as yet unseen. It's crucial that we learn the lessons now, that we take that right direction at the crossroads that we're in, and that we have that National Health Service that is fit for the future. I'm proud that the Green Party has led the way and been absolutely right on this issue for decades, that now it is the time to make it absolutely clear what we stand for. And I think we are the only party that's really, really saying this. I'll stop there, thank you.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. That was wonderful. I'm now going to invite Ed Mustill from NHS Workers Say No to introduce themselves, to introduce the group, NHS Workers Say No, and also following on from Jonathan's wonderful introduction to the disaster that is NHS privatisation, to talk a little bit more about the recent history of NHS pay and why it's so important that we fight for 15% right now. Over to Ed.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me. My name's Ed. I work in Sheffield Children's Hospital. I'm a GMB rep there, and I'm also active in the NHS Workers Say No campaign. You've probably, because I know you've had the conference motion, and you'll probably be somewhat aware of who we are, but I'll do a quick overview of where we came from and what we've done so far, and then where we're at in terms of the pay dispute. The campaign actually came out of last summer when the government offered some pay offers to certain sections of the public sector workforce and didn't offer anything to NHS workers. And there was a kind of, now those pay offers for other public sector workers were pretty bad, but there was an immediate reaction online from NHS workers saying, well, you haven't announced a single penny for us. So it did begin sort of on social media. It began as it's an entirely grassroots campaign, really. It didn't come initially from the formal structures of the trade unions. It came mainly from nurses, but it very rapidly kind of expanded to include people of all jobs and bands. I'm not a clinical staff myself. I work on the support side. We're all on the same kind of pay structure. So a national pay offer for the NHS affects basically everyone except doctors, because they've got their own contract. So it came out of that last summer. We organised a couple of national days of action in the sort of fairly short window of time where it was actually possible to have physical demonstrations. And then, of course, the second wave hit. People were unable to do sort of real world activism. And of course, from our point of view in the service, we had to deal with the second wave of the virus. The negotiations on pay sort of properly didn't start until the new year. We're coming to the end of we've actually come to the end now of a 3-year pay deal, which has expired. So actually we should have had our pay offer already, and they keep kicking it into the long grass. But basically since 2010, when the coalition government came in, depending on what sort of calculations you use, we've lost, along with the rest of the public sector, we've lost about 15 to 20% of our wages in real terms. Now, obviously, that's a result of a deliberate pay freeze policy that government and then the following Tory governments have pursued. So the demand for 15% sort of came from that. It wasn't a sort of plucked out of thin air. It came from, well, actually, it sounds like a lot. It sounds like a massive demand, but actually, if we got it in real terms, we'd only be back at the salaries that we were getting in 2010. And it's the same with the rest of the public sector. Local government staff have put in for a 10% claim for similar reasons. So that's where we sort of came from and where we're at. As I say, the last pay deal, some of the grassroots anger came from the fact that the last pay deal was a 3-year deal and it was very bad. And there's a little bit of internal union politics, which I won't go into too much, which meant that there was a kind of kickback within some of the unions that accepted that last deal, which meant there was more pressure this time round for the unions to put in a better claim. The campaign basically managed to win the argument in 2 of the big unions, GMB and Unite, to put in a claim for 15%. The Royal College of Nurses put in a claim for 12.5, and Unison put in a claim for 2,000 for flat rate for everyone. So for some people that would be around 15%. For me, it'd be about 10, you know, depending on how much you earn. But the fact that the unions put in those claims of that size is only happened because of the grassroots campaign. I don't think they would have done that of their own volition. So it's a cross-union campaign. Different unions have different positions, and that brings me to sort of where we are now, in terms of, well, you may have seen that in Scotland, where the Scottish government negotiates pay separately for NHS workers in Scotland, the Scottish government offered 4%. Some of the unions in Scotland have accepted that and some haven't. So you can see that when an offer is made south of the border, we might be in a similar situation where there's a kind of, at the moment, there's a kind of united front of the unions saying we want a decent pay rise for everyone, but that's quite fragile depending on what happens over the next few weeks. We're expecting the pay review body to make its recommendation around about the end of this month. So very, very quickly after that, there will then be a consultation within the unions about whether or not to accept that, whatever offer that is. I think it will be a very bad offer. I think it might be a little bit higher than the 1% that the government said that was all they could afford back in the spring. I think they'll offer us a little bit higher than that and then say, oh, well, we've listened to you because we're not just offering you 1%. But I don't think that's going to wash with the amount of anger that there is in the service and the kind of where people are after over a year of the pandemic. The pay claim is directly related as well to the health of the service, because I'm sure you will have seen over the last few months various news stories and various polls about the amount of NHS staff that are considering leaving the service, which some polls have said up to a third, you know. So if the pay freeze continues and it's not an attractive place to work, people are going to go and work elsewhere. And whether that means going to another country or whether it means going into working for private health providers or the third sector, I think personally that that's a deliberate policy on the part of the Tories to run down the service, because you can, you know, they've done it in various other public sector industries as well. You make the public sector a less attractive place to work. People sort of leave off their own bat. The service becomes even more understaffed than it already was, and therefore you have the excuse then to say, well, private providers have to come and pick up the slack. So it is primarily about pay and about the erosion of pay that we've suffered and the fact that we want to get back to where we were, but it is also about the service. If people have questions about the kind of in and outs of what may or may not happen over the next few weeks or months, I'm happy to answer, but the short answer is that we don't really know until we get the offer at this point. But we do appreciate any support from political parties, from community groups, from whoever. So there will be actions on the 3rd of July, which is the NHS's birthday weekend. We are back out on the street now that we're allowed to do it safely. I think we're up to maybe about 30 odd cities and towns where there's going to be protests. So you can find all that stuff out by following NHS Workers Say No Facebook page. But I'm sure you'll get it out through your local Green parties as well. But again, any help and support for those protests, and keeping it in the public eye and keeping public opinion on board is going to be very important as we go forward. So yeah, again, thanks a lot. And if you do have specific questions about the dispute, I'm happy to do my best to answer.
Thanks so much, Ed. A really good introduction to the dispute so far, and also the really crucial sort of recent history of pay in the NHS. And it's really clear that this 15% demand is a restorative demand. It's demanding justice for what's gone on in the past decade and longer, and what's been done to pay in the NHS. We're now going to go over to Larry Sanders. Larry, I'm sure you all know, was until rather recently the health and social care spokesperson for the Green Party. We couldn't think of a better speaker, frankly, from Green circles to talk about the ins and outs of health and social care and why it's so important to support the workers in this fight. So I'm going to hand over to Larry now for a few words. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Matt, and thank you for this event, and thank you and Rebecca and others for getting that motion through conference. I have a lot of difficulty with conferences. It's not my, it gets me down, but to see something like that burst through shows the importance of a democratic party, and that is the Green Party. Jonathan was talking about giving away his age. Well, I have to tell you, so I've been working in this field one way or another for over 50 years, and it's very frightening to be able to say that. And not only that, I came here as a mature kind of person, mature person from the United States. And of course, you will find in any meeting you go to in this country where the NHS is under threat, a disproportionate number of American expatriates, because we know in our bones what this NHS means. At its worst, with all the horrible things that have been done to it that people have mentioned, and which I also have observed. But to be in a situation where you're so dependent on the whims of a private service and their profit making, and the immense cost that adds to the whole service and the robbery of it all. That's what we really try, and we, to some extent, we have to give ourselves credit. It hasn't been easy. All the people who've been fighting in the various campaigns, we have kept it, the NHS, virtually kind of 90% a public service at enormous cost in lots of ways. The other big thing one big thing though, in the course of that 50 years, just over 20 odd years ago, I went to work for the Carers Forum, Oxfordshire Carers Forum, which is people supporting relatives who have disabilities. And in the course of that, several things happened. For one thing, I left the Labour Party because the local Labour Party was supporting cuts in social care, which I knew what they meant to people. And the small Green Party was saying the kind of things that I wanted to hear said. So, and I took that job at the Carers Forum because I had been a carer before that in my wife's illness, and I knew something about how well the NHS worked and how terribly lacking the care service was, and how little help I got when I really needed it. And of course, in the course of my other work as a community worker, and social worker, and a lawyer, and county councillor, I've known that it's by no means me alone that suffered from that. So one of the things I would like to be adding to this, and I'm very glad, as I understand it, the motion covered an increase in wages, support for similar increase in wages for care workers. And of course, care workers are even more badly treated by the government than NHS workers. The creation of a fully funded public social care system for this country would be comparable to Nye Bevan's job. And I hope that and expect that the Green Party will play its part in making that next huge step forward. But of course, before we can make big steps forward, we also have to win the current battles. And the battle for the 15% is a brilliant political thing. It's right, because we know the workers have had a 15, 20% decrease in their earnings from over the last 10 years, because we know what people have done in the last 18 months, the commitment, the sacrifice, the illness, the death, the hard work, the skill, what nurses have done for us, and to be offering them a cut in wages is despicable. And the government has not argued on the case that they didn't deserve it or anything like that. They just said the economy is in a difficult stage. In other words, we're back to that bizarre argument that by cutting the incomes of millions of people that you're going to improve your economy. And it's an argument I think we will have to continue to have, because not everybody understands just how bizarre it is, because it has been a kind of dogma of both of the major parties for over most of the many years. The government has, in a way to its credit, although it's done it very badly, put something like 400 billion pounds into the economy to deal with the loss of employment for millions of people. Well, okay, where is this massive inflation? When we were arguing for decent NHS, decent social care, we were talking about 10, 20, 30 billion pounds. This is 400 billion, and it's there, and it has been created by a touch of the switch. It's not been borrowed, it's not been taxed, it's just there. And it really is a learning curve for anybody who hasn't understood the economy, that the argument that there is no money is not correct. There is money, it's a political decision. And I think this country wants to have a political decision that we have NHS and social care that support people in their time of need. And what I often think is that the NHS is not just an effective way of delivering healthcare. The NHS is also a statement that we all make to each other, that we say that in your time of need, your country, your society is with you. And I think that the importance of that for social cohesion and for the maintenance of a democratic society cannot be overestimated. So it's not just the efficiency, it's not just the care, it's the statement we want to make to each other. One of the reasons why this is where the Green Party is so important in this, and I'm not trying to be tribal or to fight political elections at this point, but the Labour Party is a very frightened party, and they have come up with a proposal which seems to be for a 2.5% increase, which everybody knows is bizarre and absurd and ridiculous and all the rest of that. And they did, and somebody asked Angela Rayner why. And when a couple of years ago they had a much better policy, and she said, well, we tried that and we lost the election. And the Lib Dems have said that they want a substantial rise, and they've never mentioned any kind of figure. So really in the major political parties, and thank goodness for the work of so many people, this is now a major political party. There is only one political party which is fighting the case for the workers in the health service and in social care. And through that for the rest of the country. So I think that we have to accept that we're of enormous importance. This is a battle that will have to be fought and and can be won. And if it is won, it will be an enormous step towards creation of a much better society. And that's something I think we can all be proud of and all take some encouragement, because it'll be a hard job, but I think we can do it.
Thanks very much, Larry. That's like really stirring and really crucial to hear. And yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why organising this call is really important is because, you know, while other parties are letting us down, or are letting NHS workers down, it's absolutely vital that the Green Party, you know, plays a really active role and really sort of swings the needle on this issue. Thanks very much, Larry. Okay, so next we are going to hand over to Zach Polanski. Zach, as many of you will know, is a newly elected member of the London Assembly for the Green Party, and over the campaign, before he got elected, Zach was doing a great deal to support workers in health and social care, and so I'm going to pass over to Zach to tell you a bit more about that and about why supporting this campaign is so important. Over to Zach.
Thank you, Matthew, and thanks for the invite. And I know I say this at most occasions, but thank you for everything that you're doing with the trade union group, bringing people together. It's immensely important for all the reasons everyone's been saying this evening, but thank you for, you know, doing a lot of the work on that. And also thank you, Rebecca, for your motion. Jonathan mentioned, you know, his little celebration when it went through. If I remember, I was in the chair as chairing the conference when your motion came up, and we saw in the private chat that there was a message to say what should have taken 15 minutes. We only had like 5 minutes left, and someone said, you're not going to have time to vote on it. So I remember reading that motion at the speed of light, and while still being a neutral chair, but just making sure there was enough time to get it through. And I'm so pleased that you brought that there and got it through. It's so important. So unlike Larry, who doesn't want to be tribal, I am going to be slightly partisan now. But Larry kind of alluded to this at the end of his comments. I think as supporting trade union groups is so important, both because it's the right thing to do and the absolute necessary thing to do, and it's also a politically smart thing to do. And those two things do not have to be exclusive. In fact, it's really good when they're commensurate. Our green values are all about being on the ground in local communities. There's no social justice without environmental justice, and vice versa, and racial and economic justice too. And I think one area that in the past we've maybe given ground on, and I'm talking years ago, was we just assumed that Labour were standing for the workers and they had the connections with the trade unions. And I think more and more we're seeing examples of both elected Greens, but also Green volunteers and members just on the ground in their local parties, reaching out to trade unions and to workers who are having problems, like the NHS workers, but various other trade union groups too, and saying that, you know, we're not going to speak for them, we are going to speak with them. And that's a really important distinction there, that we're never assuming what people want or what they need, but we're doing that genuine embedding ourselves in communities, whether that's a geographical community or an occupational community. Often our Green Party members are from that community anyway, and really building those ties. So when we're speaking about these things, we're speaking from a place of either expertise because it's our occupation, or from a genuine place of authenticity where we've listened and done the groundwork and we know what we're talking about. And so I just want to give two kind of small examples of where I think we can go with this. The first of the example Matthew just alluded to, thanks to his hard work, he introduced me to a trade union in London, and I apologise that both of my stories are going to be London-centric. But as Matthew said, as the new London Assembly member, London is wired into my brain, but I promise you I do go visit other places. And there's a born Mancunian, the North is also partly where my heart is. Anyway, another conversation. But Matthew introduced me to a union called United Voices of the World, and I can't recommend them enough. They're a union working particularly with migrant workers and those in precarious jobs. And we went along to a meeting, and I think it's fair to say it was pretty harrowing what these care workers were going through. I know some of you will have heard me tell this story before, so I won't go into mass detail, but feel free to get in touch if you want more detail. But essentially, they weren't even being paid a basic minimum wage for various reasons. And all they were asking for was a London living wage, a real living wage. And the employers at the negotiations said, thank you very much, we've listened to you carefully, and then gave them complimentary pizza, as if that was as if that was okay. It's very obvious to say, but these folks were working through a pandemic when the majority of us were locked away at home, safe and sound. They were out there every day working with people in a highly skilled job that's incredibly difficult. And these people often got COVID for two very obvious reasons. One, they're in close proximity to people, and two, the demographics. They tend to, over a quarter of care workers in London are age 55 or over, and many of them are from ethnically diverse communities who we know were disproportionately affected by COVID, often because they were working in these jobs where they were close to people like care work. So one thing I did was just solidarity, got out there on the picket line with them, and we had a beautiful day in January dancing in the snow. It was joyful. I mean, I think that's a key thing as well. These guys are from Eritrea, Colombia, Brazil, Portugal. I mean, the list of countries is long, but they didn't believe that a protest had to be, a very dour and unhappy occasion. We got out there and we celebrated their cultures, we celebrated their good work. And actually we drew attention to what they were doing by the fact we were almost having a party on the street. Now that doesn't mean protest should just turn to a party, and I'm certainly aware of it being LGBT, IQA, how Pride has just turned into a party and initially started as a protest. I think we've got to find the fine line. But ultimately these things don't have to be grim. We can talk about serious subjects and we can draw attention to very serious issues, but we can find inventive or fun ways to shine the spotlight on that. Those negotiations are still ongoing. What's happened now is actually the employers have got worse with the trade unions. So now the trade unions are looking, or the trade union is looking with the workers to take the care home to court over harassment charges over some of the ways they're behaving. So that stuff's getting serious, but I think the principle there is about not parachuting yourself in, but just being there and being ready to spend the work with them. So the second part of that story has a very timely update from today. So today on the Assembly, we had a plenary where we were putting motions in to call on the Mayor of the Assembly to do things. And I put a motion in specifically about care workers. And this motion urged the Mayor to write to all councils where people aren't paid the London living wage and demand that anyone being employed by any council in London is paid at least the London living wage. And that also includes contract providers and service providers that are external. And Labour put in an amendment to my motion, which I was very happy to accept because it was actually very important, which was about unpaid carers and also their contribution to society too, and how much recovery is going to require their work as well. And I'm delighted to say that the motion passed. Now, the London Assembly is an interesting body because it's not an administration, it's a scrutiny body. Won't spend time on the call kind of diving into those details because people will dive off the call in large numbers as you fall asleep. But ultimately it means that we don't have power in the way an MP might have to make things happen, and we can't make the Mayor do anything. However, it is a huge step, particularly once we start to announce it and press release it. We haven't done it today because we're getting all that stuff together. We're probably going to press release it tomorrow so we can make a bigger splash by saying this is something that happened in the Assembly. And anyway, my point of all of this story, I'm going to wrap up, is that I think where we as Greens can really make a difference is embedding ourselves in those communities, really listening to people, and then having a genuine story that either elected people can take to chambers or councils or parliament or assemblies, or it can be not even taken to those chambers, but actually this is about volunteers who then go to the local newspapers and say, these are issues I've been working on. So this is where we can align both our electoral success, and I don't think we should be ashamed about that. We want electoral success because we want more Green representation to get these things done. But that can absolutely be aligned with representing people properly and making sure we're really listening to trade unions. So I've spoken at length there. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been really good to hear from everyone, and I'm looking forward to sticking around for your contributions.
Thanks very much, Zach. Wonderful to see the work you've been doing. I'm really excited to see how that gets received as well tomorrow. Like really great work. Thanks again to all our speakers. I know that like one or two of you might have to head off, but others are going to stay around and will be available to answer one or two questions at the end as well. So really excited for that. Before we get to that stage, I'm just going to share a very, very brief presentation, and Rebecca and I are going to basically sort of go through one or two sort of things that you in your local Green Party, or even just as a sort of Green Party member, can do in your local area to support the workers in this campaign. It's absolutely vital that we do get actively involved in this for all the reasons that people have told us in their speeches. So I'm just going to share this if I can find out how this should work. Okay, so I mean, a lot of this has already been covered, so I'm not going to sort of like overdo this, but it's really important that Greens get on board with this. Firstly, because we value action over empty gestures, as Zach has been saying. You know, we can sort of get out on the streets and show that we, you know, we are giving workers practical support, whether that's, you know, helping them to fundraise, whether that's just being sort of present with them, helping them to get more visibility in their local press, whatever that is, it's all absolutely vital. Secondly, we have real local trust and grassroots support. And, you know, when it comes to sort of really, really big, really emotional fights like this, there's going to be a lot of misinformation, you know, coming from people who don't support this, from the government, from the right-wing press, and from anyone else who wants to see this NHS Pay 15 campaign fail. And so we need to lean into the trust and connections that we have with people in our local areas. In May of this year, just last month, we succeeded in getting more and more Green councillors elected. And what that means is that we have real roots in communities, and we can use those to drive up support and really hit home our message of support for NHS workers. We need to make the most of the media traction that we already have and try and sort of build more. And finally, as I was saying, you know, we really need to sort of bust some of those myths that persist around NHS workers' pay. You know, we've seen this before. Whenever public sector workers demand a real pay rise, you know, all of the same myths will come back, and we need to be ready this time, you know, for the pay review body to come back. When it comes back with its offer in late June, we need to be ready to sort of get out ahead of that and make sure that our communities are backing a real pay rise, and ultimately backing NHS workers if and when they decide to take industrial action as well. So, I mean, just to sort of like run over a couple of the myths that often sort of go around when it comes to NHS workers' pay, and a lot of these have already been demolished by our speakers, so I'm not going to overdo this. But you know, we'll hear, we can't afford it. Well, we know we can afford it. You know, as Larry was saying, you know, we don't need to worry in a situation where the government has been, you know, creating billions and billions out of thin air to stimulate the economy, and seeing virtually no inflation as a result. We don't need to worry about spending to make sure that NHS workers can get by, can live sort of decent and dignified lives. You know, we're going to hear lots of stuff, as we sadly heard a bit at Green Party conference, you know, about NHS workers getting this pay rise when other workers didn't. Well, to that, you know, we have to say that ultimately, you know, we need to be raising the bar for everyone. And that means that when a group of workers demands more, we need to support them in those demands. And our response to other workers demanding more should be to organise ourselves to demand more in our workplaces as well. And ultimately, if NHS workers can demand this and win, then that's going to inspire other workers to go out and demand more and win as well. And, you know, this could be the start. This could be a turning point. This could be the start of a real movement away from a low pay public sector and towards a higher pay public sector that we all want to see. We're going to see lots of nonsense that's already been dealt with. People are going to say, you know, they're already paid well. Well, as Ed was saying, you know, they've seen real terms pay cuts of 15 to 20% over the last decade. We know that that isn't true. We're going to hear that it'll go down badly on the doorstep, that we shouldn't be risking, you know, our credibility with people, you know, by going out on a limb for NHS workers. And to that, we need to say that not only do people massively support giving NHS workers a pay rise at this moment in time, but ultimately, you know, this is what we are, you know, building our presence. This is what we're building our prominence in order to do. And, you know, instead of sort of being weather vanes, we really need to, you know, be landmarks, be signs, and help lead the communities that we work in. We're going to hear a lot of myths about NHS and health workers striking, sort of being risky, being dangerous. And to that, we need to say that there's nothing more dangerous than an underfunded, understaffed health service that can't afford to operate properly. And finally, we're going to hear a lot, I expect, about holding out for a 15% pay offer and fighting for it being a mistake. You know, why we're going to hear people complaining that people shouldn't be fighting for 15. And to that, we need to say that, you know, when over the last decade you've suffered a 15 to 20% pay cut in real terms, you need to hold out and fight for that real restorative pay rise. And everybody should be doing the same, and we should support NHS workers in doing that as well. And so I'm going to hand over to Rebecca now, who's going to say one or two things about how local Green parties can get involved and support this campaign, and how she and her local Green Party have been supporting the campaign in Sheffield. Over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Matthew, and thank you everyone so much for speaking this evening as well. It's been wonderful to hear those stories and to reflect back on the passing of this motion. And I just wanted to say, sort of on that, you know, this was an emergency motion, and within 24 hours, under 24 hours actually, we had nearly 200 party members co-sign this motion to get it to conference floor. So this motion, this idea, this campaign, the Green Party's support for the 15% pay rise, but also for the wider demands of the NHS Workers Say No campaign, such as ending NHS outsourcing, bringing contracts back in-house, and supporting the social care sector as well, and care workers, started life within our party with a huge amount of support. And we're here sort of today, and we're going to be sort of, you know, moving forwards, trying to sort of capitalize and grow that support. But, you know, so much has already happened. For example, you know, in the weeks that followed, I know that Anthony Slaughter, who's the leader of the Welsh Green Party, had met with the NHS Workers Say No campaign group in Wales. I know that Jonathan's, you know, been in touch and been offering support and contact. I know that in Bristol, the local party there has been out already supporting protests in front of hospitals. I know that in Brighton last year, even at the very start, Ed was sort of talking about sort of some of the action last summer, that Caroline Lucas spoke in support of the pay rise, and that actually the councillors in Brighton were sort of out with the workers supporting the campaign. And recently, just a couple of days ago, we know that Bradford have sort of, the local councillors in Bradford have sort of reached out to their local NHS Workers Say No group to sort of start organising a demo in that area. And in Sheffield, where I'm based, we actually managed to pass a motion in Sheffield City Council a couple of months ago now. It was the last motion just before the local elections, to get Sheffield City Council to actually support as a cross-party support for this pay rise, and to actually get the CEO of the council to write to the NHS pay review body to say, you know, we as a city, reflecting on the huge contribution of NHS workers locally, but also the importance of them receiving decent wages to our local economy and to the sort of sustainability of our local, you know, communities. It's actually really important. So what can we do as Green Party members going forwards over the next few weeks and months? What can we do in areas where we have councillors, and what can we do in areas where we have, you know, really strong local groups that maybe don't have elected representation, but that do have the infrastructure to support campaigns? Well, I think what we can do in the first instance is to actually reach out to NHS Workers Say No and to the local trade unions, and we can say, how can we help you? And I think what Zach was saying about the work that he's done with unions locally in London is a really good example of that. You know, we want to be able to reach out to these groups, these grassroots workers organising, and say, you tell us where you need us. Do you need us to deliver flyers? Do you need us to, you know, come and support you on a picket line or at a protest? Do you want a speaker for a demo from the Green Party? Do you need help with fundraising so that you can get those flyers printed? Let the workers sort of guide us in terms of how, as a political party and political party members, we can support those campaigns. So what me and Matthew are happy to do, and will help anyone who's interested in helping do, is we will help to put you in touch with the NHS Workers Say No local groups. We know that on the 3rd of July, as Ed mentioned, there will be demonstrations in a number of cities and towns, so we can help put people in touch with those local groups. We also, so please do turn out and support that action on the 3rd of July. Get your local party involved if you can, get your local councillors involved. If there isn't a demonstration happening near you, again, get in touch with us and we'll maybe put you in touch with NHS Workers Say No so that they can help you potentially to do something locally where they maybe don't have the capacity to do that. We're also talking to people about supporting through local press. And again, this is something that Zach mentioned, through a press release potentially, or in some cases writing letters in support of the campaign. It's, as a few people have reflected, public support for NHS workers potentially striking later in the summer or later in the year. It is really important that we start to build that public support for the idea of that industrial action now, and also build that public support for the idea of a restorative pay rise of 15%. So if you can write to your local press, your local paper, if you have those kinds of links locally, we can also help you to craft a message that would sort of help to achieve that, growing of public support. We are going to set up, and have already set up, actually, it exists, hooray, a WhatsApp group where we'll be sort of posting updates over the next couple of months as this campaign develops. And those updates will be to share information from NHS Workers Say No, but also to sort of share information on sort of what local Green parties are doing to support the campaign and what we might be sort of focusing our energy towards. And we're also going to put together a sort of resource pack, I suppose. So we're going to pull together in advance of that 3rd of July action, some of the posters, digital posters, flyers, etc., information about locations of demonstrations, a draft press release for local papers, and also a draft letter to the press, some draft tweets, draft Facebook posts, you name it. And we're going to circulate them to local parties. We've managed to sort of get in touch with the Association of Green Councillors, etc., and they're happy to share some of that for us. But we want to support you as Green Party members to support this campaign, and so we want to sort of hopefully take a little bit of the legwork out of it, because it's so important that we, as a Green Party, and we are, as others have said, the only large political party explicitly supporting a 15% restorative pay rise and explicitly supporting this campaign. It is so important that we actually now turn that motion and those words into meaningful action, and I have complete confidence that that's what we're going to do going forwards. So thanks, Matthew. I'll pass back to you.
Just unmuting myself there. Yeah, thanks very much, Rebecca. That's wonderful. Yeah, and as Rebecca says, there's so much that you can do to support local groups of workers, whether that's in the form of a NHS Workers Say No group, or whether it's a local union branch which is organising around these things. And we are going to make ourselves very, very sort of contactable and reachable for anyone who wants a little bit of support. Sort of reaching out to them and building those links and providing them with the material support that they need in the weeks and months ahead. Very soon, we're going to offer for people to sort of pose their own questions, ask anything they want while we're here. But just before we do that, I'm going to keep this screen up if I can. We've got some sort of key links and contacts you might want to make. So, as various people have said, do follow NHS Workers Say No on Twitter and on Facebook as well. They're very findable, and they're the best place to go for sort of live updates, both on what's happening with the campaign, but also sort of where you can find a demo on the 3rd of July, and also where you can find one of their local organising groups. Do also visit Keep Our NHS Public, fantastic group. They've got a really, really useful and readable list of the demos that have already been organised. They've also got some useful tips and resources on their website as well. So do find your way to their website and go and make good use of those. And finally, do join our Greens for NHS Pay 15 WhatsApp group. I promise you it is not intended to be yet another WhatsApp discussion group, but what it will do is provide you with sort of key updates on the campaign and critical resources as well. And it's also a great space for you to ask questions. So I'm going to sort of leave that there. So the QR code is there, and people who know how to use QR codes, you'll be able to use that to join the group. And we're also going to put the link in the Zoom chat as well, so that you can join that group. Okay, so we now have some time for some questions. So in terms of asking questions, I'm going to ask if people can use the raise hand function in Zoom, if you have that available to you, to indicate that you'd like to ask a question, and then we can look at the list. I'm just going to try and get the participants list up. So yeah, please do try and signify there, or in the chat if you have any questions that you want to ask. Cool. So Rebecca, if I can't see them, do let me know if there are any questions that I can't see. But I think first I'm gonna. Oh no, I can see one. I can see a hand from Jonathan Bartley. Jonathan, do you want to speak up?
Thank you. Just trying to unmute myself for them. It was really just the motion from Sheffield was really interesting. I wondered if there were plans to roll out a template motion, much like Carla's climate emergency motion, which 150, 200 councils passed. I just think there's a real appetite out there to pass motions like that, and to have a network or a template motion, you know, through the AGC, Association of Green Councils or whatever, to disperse a motion would be fantastic. And I think it would get huge pickup. So I just wondered if there are plans for that.
We can certainly incorporate it into our plans, Jonathan. So it was young Green Councillor Martin Phipps who came to me to ask for some help on putting together that motion. He sort of definitely took the initiative on that one, and I just helped with the wording. They actually quite cleverly sort of had it as an amendment to an existing motion that the Labour Party was putting forwards on sort of thanking frontline workers and key workers for their contributions during the pandemic. And we sort of went, oh, you know, and sort of tagged it on to the end, and it did pass with cross-party support. But we've still got the text of that, and it would work as a standalone motion. So we can include it in that resource pack, and probably something actually that we could prepare and send round to the Association of Green Councillors, you know, in a couple of days' time.
Thanks very much for that. I can see there's just one or two. There's one question in the chat. There's one from Keith who's asking, will there be a central London demonstration on the 3rd of July? I don't know whether you want to answer that one, Ed, or I can chime in.
There's going to be several in London. The most central one, probably the one at UCL. University College Hospital, which is really near Euston Station. But I think the idea is to have several smaller ones starting at different London hospitals rather than having a big one in the centre.
Yeah, so I think, and last time I checked, there are at least sort of 5 or 6 different events organised. And yeah, do join that central one, or, you know, if you want to organise one in your borough, yeah, do get in touch, and we can help you do that. Cool. I can see a hand from Jake. Jake, do you want to come in?
Just wondering, what, aside from the Green Party, what can us as trade union members, how can we get our union or our workplaces to support? What sort of things can we do down those avenues?
Another one maybe for Ed to come in on.
Do you want to answer that now, or do you want to take a round? And
I don't mind. At the moment, I can't see another hand, so I reckon we just crack on.
I think if you are in a union outside of the service, I think there is in the NHS Workers Say No Facebook group, there is a model motion you can put to union branches outside the NHS. But I think more important than motions and stuff is to just like turn up to the day of action on the 3rd. Try and bring some people from your branch. We always appreciate people from other unions coming out, and I think you can invite, much like I'm here now, if you can invite a speaker to your union branch, so that we can just spread the word. The other thing is, if you are on a delegate to your local trades council, or if you don't have any delegates to your local trades council, try and get on, because local trades councils are often quite kind of important logistically in terms of organising local demos, and they can provide kind of a bit of money and a bit of material and that sort of thing. And they also bring together all the different unions in a local area. So the more people we have supporting us and pushing it through trades councils as well, that's going to be important going forwards.
Thanks very much, Ed. There's another hand now from Tom. Tom, do you want to come in?
Hiya. I guess I just wanted to sort of comment that locally we've been very active on sort of NHS campaigning. We've been campaigning to oppose the closure of our local A&E, and various other sort of NHS campaigns, but I've often found that we're the only voice out there speaking up for it. I mean, our local councillor now represents our hospital at a borough and a county level. What do you do if there's no sort of infrastructure in place for sort of like resistance beyond just the Green Party? Because where we are, there's no trade union council. There's not really much of an active trade union movement beyond just casual membership. Is there any advice what we do in that kind of situation?
I don't know. Do any of our speakers sort of want to come in on that one? I don't know. Ed, do you want to come in? I've got one or two. Yeah, go on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think. Do you mind if I ask whereabouts you're based?
Yes, it's in Ashford in Kent.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are obviously parts of the country where the trade union movement's quite kind of hollowed out or quite inactive for various historical reasons. But even if you can only identify like a branch of a trade union that's up for doing stuff, I think that's like the way that you can sort of get stuff off the ground. I mean, the other thing you can do potentially, I don't know how it works in the Green Party, is like if you could do a map of your local membership and figure out who's in what union, and you might find that you've actually got maybe a cluster of members that are in that might not even know that they're all in the same branch or whatever. You know, that's something that if you've got access to your kind of local membership data, you can sort of do a ring round. And that's what I mean. I'm in the Labour Party. That's something that we're trying to do in local Labour parties. And you do come across, because of the nature of like the parties of the left, loads of our members actually work in the NHS and other public sector jobs, and you will come across members that are probably in the same union branch as each other and just don't even know it because maybe the branch isn't active. And sometimes all it takes is get a handful of people together. You can reactivate the union branch if it's not been doing anything for a while. So that's one idea anyway.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Does anyone else have any questions? Do feel free to raise your hand or just put them in the chat. And thanks so much to Ed for staying on as well. Like, invaluable to have your voice and your expertise on this. Cool. I think I have one. It's well, I think it's a good one. It's another one for Ed, I'm afraid. So we're sort of working you quite hard. But I'm interested to sort of know. I'm interested to hear a bit about sort of what you think the atmosphere is within the union membership, and sort of what kind of appetite you think there will or will not be for industrial action of whatever sort, sort of depending on, you know, whether that sort of bad pay offer comes back at the end of June.
Yeah, so that's the $1 million question in a way, is how is the membership gonna react to? I mean, I think generally speaking, I think the level of anger and the level of how people feel like we've been treated is strong enough that there will be an amount of pressure from the grassroots to take action. The way that each union moves to an industrial dispute is different. GMB, my union, because we have the 15% claim, I think if we get anything that's substantially less than that, we will move to, we'll have a ballot to consult the members on the offer, which is likely to be rejected by GMB members, I think. The problem is going to be the practicalities of it are, there are at least 11 different, in my hospital there's 10 different trade unions, right? And there are the big general unions like GMB, Unison, Unite, that have people doing all sorts of jobs in. And then because it's the health service, you've got a number of specialist unions. You've got the BMA organises doctors, the RCN nurses, you've got the Royal College of Midwives, you've got the British Association of Occupational Therapists, you've got the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists. Like, all these bodies are actually trade unions, although you might not think of them as trade unions. So, and like I sort of alluded to earlier, what happened in Scotland is that the membership of some unions has accepted the deal and the membership of other unions has rejected it. Now, as soon as that happens, you're in a much weakened position. And I think, if I'm honest, a similar thing is going to happen in England. And I wouldn't like to predict which one's going to go in what direction. But for me, I'm hoping that it's going to be a 1-year deal and not a multi-year deal like the last one was, which means that essentially by the time we've moved into being in dispute over it, a couple of months after that, we're going to go back into negotiations for the next pay round. And if we can put enough pressure on all the unions to put another proper claim in next time around, it's a question of building at the grassroots level, so that people aren't just, it's an unfortunate reality that sometimes if a union leadership says, we think you should take this deal because it's the best we can negotiate, more often than not, people will vote to accept it, even if it's a lot less than what you wanted. What we're trying to do with this campaign is build a kind of counterweight to that, so that even if we don't get the unity this time round of all the unions, maybe this time next year, where we're back in pay negotiations again, we have more of a chance of having built that unity on the grassroots level. And again, the more public support we can get for that as well, the better, because one of the things, particularly with health workers, that discourages people from taking industrial action is it'll be really unpopular with the public because it'll harm patients, and that can be a really difficult discussion to have with colleagues. So the more visible support we can see outside of the service, the better.
Thanks. Yeah, and that really sort of, I guess, just emphasises how important it is that we have people supporting. Lots of you will be union members, but it's why it's so important that we have political party support, as well as union support, as well as just support in your community. That's why it's so important that we back this practically as well as verbally. I haven't seen any more hands in the chat, or any more words in the chat or hands in the participants list. This is the last call for questions that you may have in this session. Yeah, go ahead.
Barry's waving at you politely, I think. I think maybe he's on the screen.
Oh, apologies. I haven't been looking. Please do pipe up and interrupt me if you have a question.
Can you hear me first thing?
Yeah.
Thank God for that. Right, okay. I'm not used to technology. Regards to Larry, I've only just been invited to join this group. I can't hear myself speak. Thank you for all that. I just wanted a couple of quick points. The first speaker, I think, failed to mention it was actually the Labour Party that started the whole concept of privatisation before the austerity farce. Just a small point, it needs to be recognised. Second point, as Larry will also confirm, sorry, I'm from Oxfordshire, my apologies. I'm also a retired health service worker. I did my 10 years and I'm very familiar with most of it. And I've also cared for 2 parents and relatives in and out of care homes. Our Oxfordshire District Trades Council has actually got its act together. As Larry will also confirm, it's mostly Labour Party people with a handful of fellow Greens. My worry is that the 15% campaign, which I've been aware of for some while, was printed on blue badges, not green. So if we're going to have any badges, please, can they be on green background? The reason for saying that is I picked these 15% badges up from the SWP, who run street stalls and everything here, are very active and very organised. But unfortunately, it's not usually possible to make any party political points during Trades Council meetings. That was it. Keep up the good work. I'm with you totally. I've just come back from holiday, so now I've got some energy for stuff. Thanks, colleagues. Cheers.
Thanks very much for those points, Barry. I can see Jonathan Bartley has issued a reminder of what he said in the chat, which is there for the record. Okay. I'm sort of trying to look at the cameras, although I find it really hard to catch people waving. Do just interrupt us vocally if you still have a question. But unless I get interrupted in this extended coda that I'm sort of dragging out to give people time to interrupt me, then I think this is coming to a fairly natural end. What I will say before we all go is please do, if you haven't already, join that WhatsApp group. It's a great and easy way to stay in touch with what's going on. If WhatsApp is your thing, if WhatsApp isn't your thing, but you like receiving lots of emails, or not too many, do make sure you've signed up to get emails from the Green Party Trade Union group. I'll put a link in the chat here as well, so you can do that. But most importantly, stay in touch with NHS Workers Say No on Twitter and Facebook. Keep looking out for updates on this campaign, and most importantly of all, get involved with the demonstrations on the 3rd of July, and do reach out and find out how you can support practically as well. Yeah, and thanks too for all the speakers, and especially I think to Ed Mustill for answering all our questions and for coming to speak to us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope very much to see some of you at a demonstration.